Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want to kick things off by having you ask yourself kind of the ultimate question. What exactly makes a good life? For decades, we've basically been told there are just two paths. You can either chase happiness or you can seek out meaning. But what if there's a hidden third path? Today, we're unpacking some absolutely fascinating, paradigm-shifting research from psychologist Shigehiro Oishi, and it reveals a completely different way to measure a life well lived. Here is our roadmap for today. Part 1, we'll look at the 3 good lives. 2, what is psychological richness? 3, the profile of richness. 4, embracing the uncomfortable. And 5, we'll wrap up with lessons for a richer life.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the 3 good lives. It's time to rethink happiness and meaning. So, for a really long time, psychological science has focused primarily on 2 very traditional paths to fulfillment. I want to pose this central question directly to you right now. When you sit back and picture your ideal future, what are you actually optimizing for? Are you picturing a life of complete comfort and joy, or are you envisioning a life dedicated to some higher purpose and duty? Historically, psychologists have categorized these 2 desires into the hedonic life and the eudaimonic life. The hedonic, or happy life, is all about joy, comfort, safety, and stability, right? It's about maximizing those positive emotions and minimizing the negative ones. On the flip side, we have the eudaimonic, or meaningful life. This one is all about purpose, coherence, and societal contribution. But here's the catch with both of these traditional paths. They rely heavily on stability. A meaningful life often requires really consistent routines, like dedicating yourself to a single cause, maintaining a stable marriage, or holding a consistent role in your community. And that brings us to a massive dilemma. What if you absolutely hate routine? What if stability literally makes you feel restless, and you find yourself just constantly craving the unknown? The thing is, this traditional 2-dimensional model of psychology actually leaves out a huge portion of the population who feel totally boxed in by specialized routines and endless comfort. And that restlessness, it leads us directly into our next big discovery. Moving on to section 2, what is psychological richness? Let's open the 3rd door. Enter psychological richness. A psychologically rich life is one characterized by a huge variety of interesting, perspective-changing experiences. It prioritizes complexity and novelty over monotonous consistency. It's not necessarily about being comfortable, and it's not always about serving a rigid, higher purpose either. Instead, it's about accumulating fascinating stories, totally shifting your perspective, and fully experiencing the wild, dramatic variety that life has to offer. There's this incredibly fascinating study on regret from 2020 that illustrates this perfectly. Researchers basically asked people if they could snap their fingers and undo their biggest regret, how would it change their lives? The results were perfectly split down the middle, well, into thirds. About 33% said undoing their regret would have made their lives happier. Another 33% said it would have made their lives more meaningful. But a final 33% said undoing that regret would have made their lives psychologically richer. They didn't just want more joy, they wanted the complex experiences they missed out on. So you might be wondering, why don't more of us actively choose richness? Well, it comes down to a classic psychological concept, the explore versus exploit trade-off. We face this choice constantly. Exploring means seeking the new and the unfamiliar. Exploiting means relying on the safe, familiar, guaranteed gains. Think about your vacations, for example. You could go to a brand new country where you don't speak a word of the language, that's exploring. Or you could just go back to your favorite familiar beach house, that's exploiting. Because of human familiarity bias and loss aversion, our brains almost always trick us into exploiting. We naturally default to comfort over discovery. Section 3, the profile of richness. We're getting into the mindset of the explorer. If you want to overcome that stubborn familiarity bias, you really have to adopt the mindset of an explorer. People who live psychologically rich lives tend to have what's called a holistic mindset, rather than an analytic one. See, an analytic thinker looks at the world as isolated events. When they fail, they try to pinpoint the single variable that went wrong. But a holistic thinker, they see an interconnected web. They understand that everything influences everything else. They embrace multifaceted realities, realizing that, say, a really painful breakup might actually be structurally linked to profound personal growth.
Now, hold on, I should clarify. You don't actually have to travel the globe to be an explorer. You can find profound richness within very strict constraints. Take Jiro, the legendary chef who made sushi every single day for 60 years. Or think of a Buddhist monk whose daily routine involves simply sweeping a courtyard. They aren't bored to tears because they approach these rigid constraints with intense curiosity and playfulness. I mean, Jiro massages an octopus for 45 minutes instead of 30 just to see how the microscopic texture changes. It's all about finding novelty, playfulness, and perspective shifts right where you already stand.
Which brings us to Section 4, Embracing the Uncomfortable and the Real Value of Struggle.
Pursuing psychological richness completely reframes how we view negative experiences, struggle, and discomfort. The philosopher Blaise Pascal famously said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." He was criticizing our constant, desperate need for distraction, just to escape boredom and our fear of facing despair. So many people try to cure their everyday boredom with frantic, totally meaningless activity.
But we have to make a vital distinction here. It's crucial to understand the difference between cheap thrills and true psychological richness. Sensation-seeking, like constantly needing to skydive or go to massive parties, is just a temporary thrill. It functions almost like an addiction. You eventually just return to a baseline of deprivation afterward. Psychological richness, on the other hand, requires deep reflection. It's about accumulating stories and intentionally shifting your perspectives to gain long-term wisdom. You have to actually process what you're experiencing to get the richness out of it.
Because true richness embraces the entire spectrum of life, even the darkest, most painful parts. Studies conducted on survivors of the devastating Japanese earthquakes revealed something incredible. While that adversity was undeniably painful and definitely lowered their overall happiness in the moment, it frequently acted as a massive springboard for profound growth. It shifted their values away from sheer personal achievement and toward a much deeper, systemic empathy for their community. They became psychologically richer, developing hard-won wisdom through their most profound setbacks.
All right, Section 5, Lessons for a Richer Life. Let's look at Dr. Oishi's everyday tooltip.
So how do we practically apply all this theory to our everyday lives? Let's jump into a rapid-fire, highly actionable toolkit. First, step out of narrow specialization. Try to be a generalist. Fix things around the house yourself, stay relentlessly curious, and read widely outside your field. Second, beat your familiarity bias with the take a dozen rule. Force yourself to explore at least 12 options, whether that means touring 12 apartments or trying 12 new restaurants, before you allow yourself to settle down into a comfortable routine.
Next up, actively document your life. Write and tell your stories. The good, the bad, the completely unpredictable. By editing and sharing these narratives, you reflect on them, turning raw, random events into actual psychological wealth. And remember, you can totally find richness in the familiar. Revisit an old favorite book or film, but do it intentionally with fresh eyes. You will honestly be amazed at the layers and perspectives you missed the first time around.
When you're facing major life choices, try to prioritize freedom over security. Take the calculated risk to put yourself out on a limb. In your daily life, inject a little playfulness into your chores. Text an old friend completely out of the blue. Take a literal detour on your standard commute home. And ultimately, when in doubt, just do it. When you're stuck deciding whether to stay on the couch or go to a new exhibition across town, force yourself to take a chance on the new choice.
To make those hard choices a little easier, use the fear of regret as your compass. Ask yourself, would I regret it if I stayed? And most importantly, you've got to stop fearing the negative. A psychologically rich life doesn't demand perfect smiling happiness all the time. Failures, challenges, and messy situations are just essential plot points in your life's ongoing story. They are exactly what make you wiser.
And this is a vital reminder as we start to wrap this explainer up. You absolutely do not have to choose just one path. Happiness, meaning, and psychological richness are not mutually exclusive. A truly fulfilling, dynamic life balances all three. You can totally enjoy the comfort of a happy life, contribute deeply through a meaningful life, and still actively pursue the mind-expanding adventures of a psychologically rich life. It's not an either-or situation.
Dr. Oishi actually ends his book by referencing a really poignant poem by Lewis Simpson about a man named Ed. In the poem, Ed chose a safe, highly predictable marriage over marrying the adventurous Doreen, who he actually truly loved. Years later, after his safe marriage inevitably fell apart, Ed complained to his friends that he really should have married Doreen. His friends just looked at him and asked, well, why didn't you? To all of you watching who are hesitating to take a leap right now, to try something new, or to step outside your comfort zone, well, why don't you?
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. What comfortable routine will you break today to build a richer story? Don't let your familiarity bias write your life's narrative for you. Go explore. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.